You're listening to the Music Educator podcast with your host, Bill Stevens, the 21st century music educator man.
Podcasting from beautiful Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome to the Music Educator podcast, bringing you the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. Here's your host and fellow music educator, Bill Stevens.
Hello, once again, to the Music Educator Podcast. My name is Bill Stevens. I will be your host for today, and I'm so excited you're here. Every single time, I'm so excited. It's a beautiful day. We have just finished the school year. We are now in summer break. It's a chance for us to recharge, to relax, and for a lot of us to get ready for the next school year. So I just want to say thank you for all that you do. Let's get recharged, let's get refreshed, and let's make this happen. In today's episode, Season 4, Episode 27, we're going to learn some helpful information about understanding the saxophone mouthpiece. All right, let's do this. Finding the ideal sound for your saxophone is a quest taken by many young performers. By understanding the saxophone mouthpiece, much ground can be made on this journey. However, there is not a cure-all artifact or one mouthpiece to rule them all in saxophone performance. Our goal as performers who seek to continually grow and learn is to first take the steps in the right direction in our decision-making process. Think of it as if we are investing in our knowledge and experience. Many times you'll have saxophonists who have mouthpiece-titis, that is, that person that changes a mouthpiece at every occasion. At the other end of the spectrum, you have exactly the opposite with the saxophonist who is afraid or unwilling to try anything new. The ultimate goal lies in the balance between these two viewpoints. Influential factors. There are factors that are unique to each saxophonist that prevent all from using an identical mouthpiece. These factors include, number 1, differences in the musculature of a musician's face. Number 2, differences in the body structure of the musician's face. Number 3, the shape and structure of the person's teeth. And number 4, the thickness and size of the player's lips. All of the previously mentioned factors vary the saxophonist's overall tonal concept. As a result, what the player is capable of playing on any one specific mouthpiece is limited. Knowing the subtle nuances of your particular circumstance can help you clear up any confusion based on these physical principles, and by extension, you will be able to select the correct mouthpiece for you and have an educated understanding of what to look out for in saxophone mouthpiece construction. In the beginning, most standard saxophones are supplied with a stock mouthpiece. This type of mouthpiece will generally suffice until the beginning saxophonist is capable of demonstrating the basic skills required of most beginning band programs. Typically, these stock mouthpieces have a medium facing and chamber which is appropriate for beginning musicians. Obvious issues with saxophone mouthpieces at this stage in development are generally discovered by a student's instructor or experienced saxophonist. Young saxophonists should not intrinsically feel like they need to go out to the music store and buy a new mouthpiece. Money and time and an effort is often wasted unless specifics about a mouthpiece's make and facing is provided. Otherwise, a store is going to try to make a quick buck on less essential intricacies of a mouthpiece, such as its wrapping, color, and outside shape. The sad truth is that some young saxophone players seeking to upgrade their mouthpieces often do the opposite, thus causing more harm than good. Sometimes certain well-known sax celebrities may be seen playing on a certain mouthpiece that inspires motivated players. Unfortunately, they are also quick to find out that one mouthpiece of a celebrity may work great for them with their specialized embouchure characteristics, but work out horrible for someone else's. Saxophone mouthpiece material. Most saxophone mouthpieces are made out of a type of ebonite hard rubber. Ultimately, the material a player uses for their mouthpiece is up to their preference and how it makes them feel. Differing material has slightly different properties and results. Despite the material used in saxophone mouthpieces They should consist of the same dimensions, measurements, and facing. Often, how a saxophonist feels in regards to their mouthpiece material is psychological, and there's often only subtle to little observable differentiated tone change. Glass. Glass saxophone mouthpieces tend to be less common. Despite the popularity for these mouthpieces with clarinet players, the sax glass mouthpiece is larger and prone to chipping. As a result, chips in the facing of the mouthpiece eliminate the advantage of this type of material comfort in one's own playing. Metal. I've experimented with metal saxophone mouthpieces before, which do hold the advantage of being a robust and easily tooled material. Since metal mouthpieces tend to be stronger than other materials, the outside dimensions of the mouthpiece do not need to be as girthy. This is a desirable feature for tenor and baritone saxophonists who have a smaller mouth and naturally prefer the feel of a smaller mouthpiece. Plastic. Generally, one of the most economical and commonly used mouthpiece materials is plastic. Plastic has a long history of use, and over time, it has been improved to not crack. The reason that plastic is a viable material is considered by the masses because it has high reliability of strength, low cost to purchase, and a positive characteristic sound and component to it. Ebonite. Ebonite, a type of wrought rubber, is the most universally used material for saxophone mouthpieces. It is easily shaped, tooled, and refaced. It is durable under normal circumstances and does not typically get distorted if taken care of. Note, like other mouthpiece materials, ebonite will chip or get damaged if the tip is dropped or not handled with care. All materials. Now, all saxophone mouthpieces should be cleaned inside and out after every use. They can be easily cleaned with soap and lukewarm water, however, never in hot water for the chance of malformation. For quick, in-between rehearsal sessions, saxophonists should wipe the inside and out with a soft cloth. Avoid creating a germy breeding ground in your mouthpiece by keeping it clean. In addition to dirty mouthpieces getting you sick, calcified sediment can also get into the inside of the chamber and the inner workings of the saxophone. Hey everybody, now a quick word from our sponsor. Do you have an idea for a great new podcast? You can bring your idea to life and start your podcast today with Libsyn. Our podcast has been with Libsyn for about 3 years now, and we love it. Libsyn has everything you need to plant, launch, and grow your podcast. Libsyn provides some of the best resources created by expert podcasters who will show you everything you need to know, like what equipment you should use, how to record great audio, how to get your show onto Apple Podcasts and other popular platforms, and much more. Plus, as a friend of the Music Educator podcast, when you sign up with Libsyn, you get your first month of podcasting hosting for free. There has never been a better time than right now for you to start podcasting. Visit Libsyn.com and use code FRIEND, FRIEND. That's Libsyn, LIBSYN.com, and use code FRIEND, FRIEND, to get started and create your podcast today. And now, let's continue with the show. The saxophone design. It is very important to pay attention to the design of a saxophone mouthpiece. This is because its shape and dimensions directly influence the effect on tone quality, pitch, volume, flexibility, a quality of registers, and your ease of playing. Knowing that these specific factors contribute to the mouthpiece's tonal production, you, as the saxophonist, can now start to craft a quality mouthpiece to your desirable specifications. To start, know that the saxophone's tone quality begins within the inner chamber of the mouthpiece. The reed and mouthpiece work together to generate a vibrational mechanism. This vibration entering the dimensionally measured inner chamber sets up the relationship for the fundamental tone to resonate within its various partials. Ultimately, this affects the overall tone quality of the sound being produced. The mouthpiece facing. Now that we have established what happens within the inner chamber, it is important to identify what contributes to creating an ideal vibrational effect as it enters the inner chamber. To start, let's come to a consensus that there is an average accepted measurement to the start of the mouthpiece, where the mouthpiece enters the mouth, referred to as the medium facing. This is an average measurement that has been determined through trial and error. Note, it is not a precise or even ideal measurement, but rather a starting point where a saxophonist may proceed. With the end of the mouthpiece measurements in mind, we can identify the factors that manipulate its performance. Number 1, the facing. The facing is the shape curve of the mouthpiece that protrudes the flat table of the mouthpiece design. Depending on the extent of the facing, it determines the control a player has between the tip of the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece. The opening is called the tip opening. The distance of the curve between the tip and the beginning of the curve is known as the length of the facing. With a long facing length, saxophonists are prone to biting. This is due to the needed use of pressure to close the reed to the point it will vibrate. When a mouthpiece that is using a long facing length, it requires a shorter bite and softer reed. As a result, this often weakens higher notes on the instrument. With a short facing length, there is less embouchure control and flexibility. Often, the tone is thin and low notes tend to crack or break. There is typically less embouchure strain, however, lacks the ability for wide range of dynamics. Due to the wide tip opening with a short facing length, it makes soft playing difficult. There is a false sense of volume and a subpar tone quality. If a saxophonist uses something other than a soft reed, powerful embouchure muscles are required to compensate for it. Since a short facing length narrow tip requires a harder reed and produces a thin tone in the upper register, the pitches tend to go sharp in pitch. It is generally agreed upon by most professional saxophonists that the curve of the actual facing should be the consistency of a perfect circle. As a result of scientific findings, and by hypothetical extension, an undefined number of facings would result in the curvature that follows the axis of a perfect circle's arc. Number 2, the baffle. The baffle is part of the mouthpiece that is located just behind the reed. It is the surface area that the air, vibrated by the reed, strikes directly, and is therefore vitally crucial. Generally, the closer the baffle is to the reed, the more powerful and bright the sound will be. In the case of a straight baffle, the sound will be dark and soft. In contrast, a high-step baffle will produce a metallic and aggressive tone. For a more balanced sound, a circular baffle will provide more flexibility and give players the option to adjust based on the comfort of play and resistance to the mouthpiece preferences. In addition, a high baffle, which leaves little space between the mouthpiece and reed, helps to reinforce the upper partials of the instrument. Subtle tone qualities include more of a buzz and edge to the sound. This sometimes is the cause of squeaks. In contrast, low baffle produces a dark sound that often doesn't carry the sound as far. As a result, there is considerably more resistance close to the tip of the reed and is difficult to blow. Number 3, the tip rail. The tip rail is the arc-shaped flat region at the tip of the saxophone mouthpiece. The tip rail is responsible for improving the response of a mouthpiece. Tip rails that are too wide make the mouthpiece unresponsive to articulation and resistant to blowing. However, are excellent for soft playing but incapable of projection. This aspect of design releases a more immaculate sound with no edgy qualities, but also allows for little flexibility. In contrast, a tip rail that is too thin is often prone to squeaking or chirps. Since a narrow rail offers little resistance and is difficult to control, the reed must fit perfectly. This design element is great for a more buzzy type of projection and is recommended to only be used with experienced saxophonists. Number 4, the chamber. The chamber is primarily designed for the resonance of tone in the saxophone mouthpiece. Although the facing of the mouthpiece is of importance, the chamber can produce positive results with any reasonable facing. Generally, small chambers lead directly into the mouthpipe, which will provide more volume and edge to the sound in contrast to larger chambers. Chambers with straight side edges assist in the performance of higher partials, as opposed to chambers with more curved side walls produce a mellower tone. It is also important to understand that the inner shapes of chambers can add a variety of tonal colors that are hard to generalize. Other saxophone mouthpiece selection considerations. The selection of the ideal saxophone mouthpiece will take time and patience. Consider starting with a medium and a standard-based mouthpiece to start from. As your saxophone abilities improve, you will start to prefer certain styles and sound characteristics of your instrument. Be sure to take the time to settle on these preferences of style and sound. Avoid trying to make the mouthpiece a quick solution to upgrade your saxophone performance game. Remember that creating bad habits as a result of poor choices take long periods of time to remedy and can be costly to resolve. Self-taught students are prone to develop bad habits. However, these can be minimized through moderation and starting on a medium type of mouthpiece. Helpful tips. A rephased mouthpiece will not change the tone quality to a saxophone mouthpiece. Remember, tone quality depends on the mouthpiece chamber and baffle. The use of a rubber pad or patch on top of the mouthpiece eases the vibration through the teeth. It also opens the mouth more and makes the tone mellower. Mouthpieces that are too high can be carefully cut down with a fine file and repolished. However, it is always recommended to have a professional instrumental technician do this for you. When you compare differing mouthpieces, be sure to tune them and note any intonation tendencies. Some mouthpieces are of different lengths and thus require a different placement on the cork. Since saxophone mouthpiece construction is the same for the entire saxophone family, it is easy to overlook the fact that some mouthpieces are different in size. As a result of this, you do not need to make the same facing and make a mouthpiece if you are doubling on other horns. And finally, remember that saxophone mouthpieces will not compensate for poor air support or embouchure shape and control. Conclusion. In conclusion, the seasoned saxophonist has the opportunity to wisely moderate and test saxophone mouthpieces that suit their tastes in style and sound. It is best to start the selection process by not trying to play on the ideal mouthpiece at first, but rather a medium or an average rated one in order to grow into a mouthpiece that is better developed for you, the performer. It is important to take the time necessary to make well-informed decisions, as well as be able to demonstrate proficiency on the mouthpiece and prove that the characteristics based on your personalized specifications meet your expectations. As a result of wise decision making, you will be able to select the best saxophone mouthpiece possible. That is all the time we have for today. In today's episode, you can also visit our bandbuzz.org blog to see illustrations. I also want to thank you again for joining me for this episode of the Music Educator podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to share this craft with lovers of music and educators like you. If you found value in today's episode, please feel free to leave a review and rate us on the Music Educator podcast app, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcast aggregator. Also, please consider supporting the show by becoming an official Music Educator podcast member or advertise with us on the podcast. Information for this can be found in the show notes. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you join us next time. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Music Educator podcast. For the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. You can subscribe to our podcast on every podcast aggregator or download the Music Educator app for free in the Apple or Google Play app stores. Furthermore, visit our blog at www.bandbuzz.org for additional music education resources. We will see you on the next episode of the Music Educator podcast. And remember, music can change the world.
Hey everyone, this is Bill Stevens with the Music Educator podcast. See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code from the Music Educator podcast to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Get your show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, anywhere you want. Get critical stats to help you grow, find all the tools and support you need to sound your very best. You can even do video. Really, bring your podcast to life with Libsyn. See show notes for a unique Libsyn promo code and get podcasting.